Georgia, October 1945, Fort Harwell Processing Base. Lena Brandt stepped off the transport truck and looked at the soldier holding the clipboard. He didn't look up. No rifle raised, no dogs, no line of guards waiting with the particular stillness of men who have been given permission. Just a young man with sunburned arms checking names against a list, a truck idling behind her, and the flat Georgia heat pressing down on everything equally. The soldiers, the dust, the 14 German women standing in the yard not knowing what came next. Hilde appeared at her shoulder. "They're calm," she said quietly. "Yes," Lena said. "That's the part that worries me." The order came in flat, clipped English, and it didn't need translating. "Line up." The 14 German women moved into position in the Georgia heat, boots scraping against the dry red dirt of the base yard. The sun was already working hard at 9 in the morning, pressing down on their shoulders with the particular indifference of a climate that didn't know or care where they had come from. Lena Brandt took her place in the line and fixed her eyes forward. Beside her, 2 women she barely knew stood with their jaws set and their hands loose at their sides, the posture of people preparing to absorb something. Hilde Maurer stood 4 places to Lena's left, spine straight, face empty. She had said it on the truck coming in quietly, to no one in particular. "This is where it starts." The soldier with the clipboard walked the line slowly, young, sunburned, moving without menace but without warmth either. The neutral efficiency of someone processing a task. Behind him, 2 other soldiers carried wooden crates between them and set them down in the dirt without ceremony. Lena watched the crates. The first soldier reached in and lifted out a folded bundle, cotton fabric, pale green, a dress, and held it toward the woman at the front of the line. The woman didn't move. He waited, not impatiently, just waited, the dress held in both hands, until she reached out and took it. Then he moved to the next woman. Inside each bundle, a dress, a bar of soap, a toothbrush still in its paper sleeve, a pair of soft canvas shoes, items that had not existed in the Germany Lena had left. Not in any shop, not in any distribution queue, not anywhere. She had not seen a full bar of soap in 14 months. The one in her hands was smooth and white and smelled of something clean and faintly floral, and it was completely, almost offensively ordinary to the men handing it out. No one smiled. No one watched for their reaction. The soldiers moved down the line with the bored focus of men completing a checklist, and when the last bundle had been handed out, the soldier with the clipboard made a mark on his sheet and said something to the man beside him about the afternoon schedule. That was it. No parade, no ceremony of humiliation. No cameras, no laughter, no audience. Lena looked down at the soap in her hand. Hilde's voice came from 4 places to her left, low and controlled. "Don't read too much into it," she said. "It costs them nothing." Lena said nothing back, but she closed her fingers around the soap and held it, and the smell of it, clean, plain, real, stayed with her long after they were moved inside. Work assignments came the following morning on the same folded slips of paper as always. Lena's sent her to the base supply station, a long, low building near the eastern fence that processed incoming goods and distributed them across the base. "Report at 7. Ask for Cooper." Hilde sent her to the base laundry, a converted warehouse 2 buildings over that ran 6 days a week processing uniforms, linens, and whatever else the base generated in volume, which, Hilde observed when she arrived, was considerable. They walked together as far as the fork between the buildings. The base was already moving around them. Jeeps crossing the yard, soldiers in clean uniforms heading toward the mess hall, a group of civilian women from the town arriving through the side gate with baskets and a level of conversational noise that suggested they had been doing this long enough to feel at home. A delivery truck idled near the supply station, its bed stacked with crates. Hilde looked at the truck, then at the crates, then at Lena. "Tomorrow there will be another truck," she said, "and the day after another." "Probably," Lena said. "In Bremen," Hilde said. "My mother stood in a queue for 4 hours for half a kilo of flour." She said it without self-pity, just placement, a fact set beside another fact. 4 hours. Lena looked at the truck. "I know." "They don't," Hilde said and walked toward the laundry. Dale Cooper was already inside when Lena arrived. moving between shelves with a clipboard and the unhurried authority of a man who had organized this space himself and trusted no one else's system for it. He was broad through the chest, gray at the temples, with the particular economy of movement of someone who had stopped wasting energy on anything that didn't need it. He looked up when she came through the door, assessed her in one glance, and pointed to the far counter. "Incoming manifest," he said. "Each crate gets checked against the list. You find a discrepancy, you mark it and set the crate aside. You don't find one, you stack it on the left." His English was southern and unhurried, and she caught most of it. "Yes," she said. "I understand." He nodded and returned to his clipboard. She went to the counter and began. The crates contained supply goods, medical items, cleaning materials, packaged food for the mess hall stores. She worked methodically, checking each item against the manifest, and within the first hour had found a rhythm that required just enough concentration to keep her thoughts from wandering. Dale moved around the station behind her, signing forms, directing 2 American civilian workers, occasionally answering the telephone on the wall with the same 2-word efficiency he applied to everything. At mid-morning, a soldier came in off the yard and dropped a duffel on the counter beside Lena with a request for Dale. Dale signed something, handed it back, and the soldier left. On his way out, he passed the small table near the door where a coffee pot sat beside a plate of biscuits left by one of the civilian women that morning. The soldier took a biscuit without breaking stride, eating it in 2 bites as he pushed through the door back into the sun. He had not thought about it for a single second. Lena watched the door close behind him. At noon, Dale told her to stop and eat. He said it the way he said everything, not unkindly, not gently, just directly, as a thing that needed saying. He gestured toward the back room where the staff took their meals, a small space with a table and 4 chairs and a window that looked out onto the yard. A plate had been set for her. She looked at it. It was not a small plate. Hey, if you're enjoying the content, don't forget to like and subscribe to help the channel grow. Also, I'd love to know which part of the US you're watching from. Let me know in the comments below. She picked up the fork and began to portion in her head, calculating without deciding to. The way you calculate when calculation has been necessary for long enough that it becomes automatic. She took a modest scoop and moved the rest to the side of the plate. Dale was at the doorway. "Nobody's counting your plate here," he said. She looked up. "Eat," he said. Not harsh, just plain. "All of it. There's more if you want it." He went back to the main room. Lena looked at the food she had pushed to the side of the plate. Then she pulled it back. She ate all of it slowly, without fully believing the entire time that it was allowed, that no one was going to appear with a ledger and mark it against her. No one appeared. The canteen was visible from the supply station's side window, and by the end of the first week, Lena had developed an involuntary habit of glancing at it during the slow moments of the afternoon. It ran from 11 until 2, and the line outside it never seemed to shorten. Soldiers moving through steadily, emerging with trays loaded in a way that would have been unimaginable in any German city in the last 3 years of the war. Not luxury food, not elaborate, just volume, variety, consistency. The 3 things that disappear first when a country begins to consume itself. She watched a young soldier come out of the canteen one afternoon with his tray and sit on a low wall in the yard. He ate without hurry. Halfway through his meal, he set his fork down, tore off a piece of bread, and held it out toward a stray dog that had appeared at the edge of the yard. A thin, hopeful animal with one torn ear. The soldier waited until the dog came close enough, then tossed the bread. The dog caught it. The soldier tore off another piece and tossed that too, then picked up his fork and continued eating. He had not thought about it. He had simply had enough to share, and had shared it. The way you do, when running out, is not a calculation you carry. Lena stood at the window for a moment after the soldier finished his meal and went back inside. She had not seen anyone share food without thinking about it in a very long time. That evening, back at the barracks, Hilde sat on her bunk with her arms crossed and the expression of someone who had been turning something over all day and had arrived at a conclusion she didn't entirely want. "The laundry," she said when Lena came in. "What about it?" "The volume." Hilde looked at the wall. They process more in one day than our entire district managed in a month at the end. Clean uniforms, fresh linens, replacement issue when something wears out. She paused. No soldier there is wearing a uniform. He has repaired himself. No, Lena said. In Bremen. I know about Bremen, Hilde. Hilde looked at her. Then say it. Lena sat down on her own bunk. They have more than we had. They have had more for a long time, and the war didn't come here, not to these streets, not to these buildings. She folded her hands. That's not a trick. That's just what it is. Hilde was quiet for a moment. They waste it. Some of it, Lena said. Or they simply have enough that the edges don't need to be watched. Hilde said nothing. A soldier fed a stray dog from his lunch today, Lena said, without thinking about it. The silence that followed was different from Hilde's usual silences. Less structured. She uncrossed her arms slowly and looked at her hands. What did Cooper say to you today? She asked. He told me nobody's counting my plate. Hilde looked up. He meant it, Lena said. Hilde lay back on her bunk and looked at the ceiling. Outside, the Georgia evening was settling into its long, warm, insect-loud quiet, a sound completely unlike anything either of them had grown up with, full and alive and entirely indifferent to the conversation happening inside this small wooden room. It's not propaganda, Hilde said finally to the ceiling. That's the problem. It would be easier if it were propaganda. Lena said nothing. She unfolded Robert's, Dale's. She corrected herself. She lay down and looked at the same ceiling. Get some sleep, she said. Hilde didn't answer. But the light stayed off, and after a while the sound of her breathing slowed, and outside the Georgia night continued its enormous, unhurried noise. The third week moved differently than the first two. The fear had not disappeared, but it had changed shape. From something sharp and immediate into something duller, more ambient. The low-grade disorientation of people who have been bracing for an impact that keeps not arriving. The base had its own rhythm, and they had, without deciding to, begun to move inside it, which made the three things that happened that week harder to dismiss. The first happened on a Tuesday. Dale had sent Lena to the far end of the supply station to reorganize a section of shelving that had been restacked incorrectly by a civilian worker the day before. It was straightforward work, checking labels, reordering by date, nothing that required instruction. She worked through it quietly, and at some point became aware of a conversation happening on the other side of the shelving unit. Two soldiers. She could not see them. She was not trying to listen. The words simply arrived. One was talking about home. Georgia farm, younger brother, a mother who sent cookies that arrived crushed, but were eaten anyway. The other was laughing at something. Then the tone shifted, the way tones shift when something real enters a conversation. The first soldier said, "My dad came back from the first war and never talked about it once. Not one time in his whole life." The second was quiet for a moment. Then, "You going to be like that?" A pause. "I don't know yet. I just got back." "You can talk to the chaplain. Cooper said he's good." "Maybe." Then one of them stood, and their boots moved away across the floor, and the conversation was over. Lena stood on her side of the shelving and held a tin of machine oil in both hands and did not move for a moment. She had been taught that American soldiers were hard, manufactured for certainty, that they moved through the world without the weight of doubt, because they had been told since birth that they were on the right side of everything, and right sides do not require examination. The man on the other side of the shelf had just come home from a war and didn't know yet if he would be able to talk about it. That was not hardness. That was the same thing she had seen in the faces of German men returning from the Eastern Front. That particular interior weather, that unresolved accounting. It wore the same expression in every language. She put the tin on the correct shelf and continued working. The second thing happened on Wednesday. She was at the main counter when Dale came in from outside and went directly to his clipboard without speaking. He worked for several minutes in silence, marking items, signing a form, handing it to the civilian worker near the door. Then, with the same flat tone he used to report inventory discrepancies, he said, "My son came home from the Pacific in August." Lena looked up. "He's missing the last two fingers on his right hand." Dale made a mark on the clipboard. "He's learning to do everything over again. He turned to the next page. He doesn't complain about it. That bothers me more than if he did. He moved to the far shelf and began checking dates on the top row. Lena watched him for a moment. His back was to her. His movements were exactly the same as they always were, measured, unhurried, without waste. Nothing in the set of his shoulders performed the grief. It was simply there, the way a load is there when someone has been carrying it long enough to stop adjusting their posture around it. "I'm sorry," she said. "He's alive," Dale said. "That's what I hold on to." He finished the shelf and moved to the next one. Lena returned to her manifest. Her pen moved across the page and she checked each item carefully and said nothing else, because nothing else was needed, and Dale was not a man who required more from a moment than the moment contained. But she thought about it for the rest of the day. The plainness of it, the way he had said he's alive, that's what I hold on to, as though it were a tool he picked up each morning and carried because it was the most useful thing available. No performance of strength, no demand for recognition. Just a man doing his work and holding on to the one true thing he had. The third thing happened on Thursday, and it happened to Hilde. The base PX store sat between the mess hall and the motor pool, a low building with a screen door that slapped shut behind everyone who entered, and a hand-painted sign above it that Hilde had read from a distance several times without going in. On Thursday afternoon, her laundry shift ended 40 minutes early due to a delivery delay, and she had time before the return truck came. She stood outside the screen door for a moment, then she went in. It was not a large space. Shelves along 3 walls, a counter at the back, a ceiling fan turning slowly overhead. A soldier browsed near the far wall. A civilian cashier read a magazine behind the counter without looking up. The shelves held chocolate bars in several varieties, cigarettes in cartons, soap, shaving cream, razors, tinned food, bottled drinks, magazines, playing cards, writing paper, envelopes, toothpaste, boot polish, hard candy in glass jars, chewing gum in multiple flavors, canned fruit, peanuts, crackers, all of it available, all of it priced in cents, amounts so small they described a world where scarcity had not yet arrived and was not expected. Hilde walked slowly along the first shelf. She picked up a chocolate bar and looked at it. A name brand, the wrapper clean and bright, the kind of thing that had vanished from German shops in 1942 and had not returned. She turned it over and read the price on the back. She set it down. She picked up a bar of soap, turned it over, set it down. She stood in front of the shelf of tinned fruit and read the labels one by one. Peaches, pears, fruit cocktail, mandarin oranges. And the tins were full and stacked 3 deep, and there were more on the shelf above. The soldier near the far wall picked up 2 chocolate bars, a pack of cigarettes and a tin of crackers, carried them to the counter, paid, and left. The screen door slapped behind him. The cashier went back to her magazine. Hilde stood in the middle of the store. She was there for a long time. Long enough that the cashier looked up once, assessed her, and looked back down without concern. Long enough that another soldier came in and left before she moved. Then she walked out. She sat on a low wall outside and waited for the truck and did not speak to the other women waiting beside her. That night she came to Lena's bunk and sat at the end of it without asking. "The PX," she said. Lena waited. Chocolate, tinned fruit, soap, cartons of cigarettes. Hilde's voice was controlled, but carrying something underneath it that control was not quite managing. All of it just there, for anyone, for cents. She stopped. A soldier came in and bought 2 chocolate bars like he was picking up something he'd forgotten. He didn't even look at the price. "No," Lena said. "My mother," Hilde started and then stopped. "I know," Lena said. "She traded her wedding ring for cooking fat." Hilde said it quietly, looking at the floor. "In 44. She didn't tell me until after." She pressed her lips together. "And here there is a store, on a military base, with chocolate in glass jars." Lena said nothing. "It's not propaganda," Hilde said. The same words she had said 3 nights ago about the laundry, but arriving differently now, not as a reluctant concession, but as something that had moved further through her and was looking for where to settle. "They actually live like this. They have lived like this. While we..." She stopped again. "While we were told that sacrifice was strength," Lena said quietly. That doing without was proof of something. Hilde looked at her. Yes. And all along, Lena said, it was just doing without. The room was quiet. Outside, somewhere across the base, a radio played, faint and tinny through the warm night air, an American song with a brass section and a singer whose voice carried the particular lightness of someone performing for people who are not afraid. It reached them through the window like a small, oblivious fact about the world they were inside. Hilde stood up and went back to her bunk. She did not say goodnight, but she didn't need to. Sunday came in quietly. The base ran at half pace on Sundays, fewer trucks, fewer formations, the particular loose ease of a place that had agreed to breathe for one day before resuming. The laundry was closed, the supply station was closed. The women had no assignment until the afternoon work detail at 2 and the hours between breakfast, and then belonged to no one in particular. Lena spent the morning at the small table near the barracks window, writing a letter she wasn't sure would arrive. She wrote slowly, choosing words that were true but wouldn't frighten. Her mother was still in Dresden, or had been, the last she knew. She wrote about the weather. She wrote about the work. She wrote, I am well. I am being treated with more decency than I expected. She stopped there and looked at the sentence for a long time before deciding to leave it. Hilde had gone out after breakfast without saying where. The base chapel sat near the northern fence, a modest white building with a plain cross above the door, and a gravel path leading up to it that someone kept clear of weeds with more regularity than the surrounding grounds suggested. Sunday services ran at 9. Hilde had walked past it twice in the previous weeks without stopping, noting it with the same flat attention she applied to everything on the base. Catalogued, filed, assigned no particular weight. This morning she was walking back from the mess hall when the sound reached her. Not music. Voices, speaking in unison, then separating, then coming back together. The low collective murmur of a group of people addressing something they believed was listening. She had heard it before from a distance. Today, for a reason she didn't examine, she stopped. The chapel's side window was open to the morning air. She stood 6 feet from it. Inside, 2 rows of soldiers sat facing forward, some in dress uniform, some in fatigues. A chaplain stood at the front, a lean man in his 40s with the bearing of someone who had been in the military long enough to carry both things comfortably, the faith and the rank, without one apologizing for the other. He was not reading from notes. He spoke from memory, slowly, with the care of someone who understood that words said in rooms like this had weight and needed to be placed correctly. Hilde listened. He prayed for the men still recovering in the base hospital. 3 names, said individually, given the small dignity of being spoken aloud in front of witnesses. He prayed for the families at home still waiting for sons who were late in returning. He paused. Then he said, Lord, we ask for mercy on those who suffered on every side of this war, for the German families in the rubble of their cities, for the children who had no part in what was decided above them, for the dead who died believing things that were not true and who deserved the chance to know better. Hilde's hand found the window frame. We do not ask you to excuse what was done. We ask you to hold those who could not escape it. The soldier who followed orders, he should have refused. The civilian who looked away when looking away felt like survival. Lord, have mercy on the ones who were lied to most of their lives and never got to find out. In the front row, a soldier had his face in his hands. His shoulders were not shaking. He was not weeping loudly, not performing anything, but his hands were pressed hard against his eyes, and his breath was visible in the slight movement of his chest. The man beside him did not look away. He did not place a hand on his shoulder or lean over to speak. He simply remained, present, close, allowing the other man the full space of what he was feeling without requiring it to be smaller. No one in the room looked at the soldier in the front row with anything other than recognition. Hilde stood at the window. She had been prepared for American faith to look like a flag, loud, directional, aimed outward at an enemy or upward toward national mythology. She had seen that version before, heard it in speeches, watched it used as fuel for things that required fuel, that she understood, that had a logic to it, even if the logic was ugly. This was not aimed at anything. The chaplain was not building a case. He was not recruiting. He was standing in a plain room on a Sunday morning, asking his God to hold the people his country had just spent 4 years fighting. Asking for mercy on the lied to, the trapped, the ones who followed and the ones who looked away. And the soldiers in the rows in front of him were sitting with their heads bowed like men who had thought about this before and were grateful someone was saying it out loud. For the children who had no part in what was decided above them. Hilde thought about her younger sister, 14 in 1939, raised entirely inside it. The rallies, the youth groups, the posters on every wall, the teachers who taught one thing and one thing only. Her sister had not chosen any of it. It had simply been the water she grew up swimming in. Who deserved the chance to know better? The prayer ended. The chaplain bowed his head for a moment in the silence that followed, and the soldiers bowed theirs, and the man in the front row lowered his hands from his face slowly and sat up straight and stared at the cross above the altar with the expression of someone who has just set something down and is not yet sure his arms know what to do without the weight. No one asked him to explain himself. No one looked away from him. No one was ashamed of him. Hilde stood at the window until the congregation began to stir. The low sounds of people returning to themselves after something. And then she stepped back from the wall and walked back toward the barracks. She walked slowly. The base moved around her in its Sunday ease. A group of soldiers crossing the yard, a jeep idling near the motor pool, the smell of coffee coming from somewhere, a dog sleeping in a patch of sun near the mess hall steps. All of it ordinary, all of it continuing without any awareness of what had just happened to the woman moving through it. She went inside. She sat on her bunk. She did not lie down. She sat upright with her hands in her lap and looked at the middle distance and did not move for a long time. Lena looked up from her letter when Hilde came in. She read the room in one glance, the particular stillness of Hilde, the way she sat, the absence of the low-current tension that Hilde carried in her body, the way some people carry their keys, always present, always slightly audible. She put down her pen. She waited. An hour passed. Outside, the base moved through its slow Sunday. The ceiling fan in the hallway turned. Someone laughed in the next room. The dog near the mess hall steps found a better patch of sun and relocated. Then Hilde said, "A soldier was crying in the front row." Lena said nothing. "In front of everyone, in front of the whole room." Hilde's voice was level, carrying the weight without performing it. And no one looked away from him. No one was ashamed of him. No one asked him to stop. She paused. The man beside him just stayed. That was all. He just stayed. Lena was quiet for a moment. What was the prayer about? Hilde looked at her hands. "Us," she said. "Among others. The German families. The children raised inside the lies. The ones who followed orders. The chaplain asked for mercy on the ones who were lied to most of their lives and never got to find out." The room was very quiet. "We were never allowed that," Hilde said. "To cry in front of anyone, to break in front of anyone. It meant weakness. It meant you were not." She stopped. "It meant you were not what they needed you to be." She pressed her lips together. That soldier cried in front of his entire company, and the chaplain prayed for his enemies, and no one in that room looked like they thought either of those things was wrong. Lena watched her. "What does it mean," Hilde said, "to have lived your entire life being told that strength is the absence of feeling, and then to see a room full of soldiers sitting quietly while one of them breaks, and understand that those men are not weaker for it?" She shook her head slowly. "They are not weaker for it." "No," Lena said. "They're not." Hilde looked up at her. Her eyes were dry. She was not going to cry, or not yet, not today. But they held something new. Not softness exactly. More like the expression of someone who has been holding a position for a very long time and has just realized the position is no longer necessary, but doesn't yet know how to stand without it. "I don't know what to do with any of this," she said. "I know," Lena said. "How do you carry it? Everything we've seen here, how do you carry it back?" Lena thought about Dale, about nobody's counting your plate, about his son, learning to do everything over again with 3 fingers, not complaining, which bothered his father more than if he did. About the soldier on the wall feeding the dog without thinking, You carry it the same way you carried everything else, she said, one day at a time. Except this time what you're carrying is true. Hilde looked at her for a long moment. Then she lay down on her bunk, facing the wall, and pulled her blanket up and said nothing more. But her shoulders, for the first time since the truck had rolled through the base gate 3 weeks ago, were not braced. That was enough. That was in fact everything. The notice came on a Thursday, same as always. Same folded paper, same block letters, same interpreter delivering it without ceremony. End of the week, repatriation processing. They would be going home. Lena read it once, folded it, and put it in her pocket. She finished the morning's manifest without stopping. There were still crates to check and a list to verify, and the work did not pause for the fact that she was leaving it. Dale said nothing about it until the last afternoon. She was restacking the final shelf of the week when he appeared at the end of the row and leaned against the frame with his arms crossed, not blocking her way, just present. He watched her work for a moment with the quiet attention he had given her since the first day. "You did good work here," he said. "Thank you," she said. He was quiet for a moment, then, "You know what I've learned in 30 years of this?" He didn't wait for her to answer. The people worth trusting aren't the ones who were never wrong. They're the ones who figured out they were wrong and kept going anyway. Lena set the last tin on the shelf and straightened up. "Keep going," Dale said simply. He pushed off the frame and walked back to his desk. That was all. She took her coat from the hook by the door and walked out into the Georgia afternoon, and she carried those 11 words the way you carry something you already know you will never put down. Friday morning, the truck at 7. The base moved around them in its ordinary way, indifferent to departure the way it had been indifferent to arrival, which was its own kind of dignity. A soldier crossed the yard with a coffee in each hand. The dog was at the mess hall steps again. The screen door of the PX slapped open and shut behind someone starting their day. Lena and Hilde stood side by side with their bags at their feet. Hilde was looking at the chapel. It was closed this morning, plain white in the early light, cross above the door, gravel path swept clean. Nothing happening inside it. Just a building, ordinary, asking nothing. The truck pulled up. The tailgate dropped. The women climbed in one by one. Lena settled against the metal wall. The canvas flap came down and the light narrowed and the engine turned over beneath them and the base began to move away. Hilde sat across from her in the half-dark, hands in her lap. She watched the thin line of light at the bottom of the canvas flap for a moment. Then she looked up. "The chaplain said they deserved the chance to know better," she said. "The ones who were lied to." "Yes," Lena said. "Do you think we do? Know better now?" Lena looked at her. At the woman who had arrived on this base with her spine straight and her arguments loaded and her certainty worn like armor, and who was sitting now with her hands open in her lap, asking a real question and meaning every word of it. "Yes," Lena said. "I think that's exactly what happened to us." Hilde held her gaze for a moment. Then she nodded. Once, small, the nod of someone closing an account that has finally been settled. She looked back at the strip of light beneath the canvas. Outside, the base continued its morning. The dog found his patch of sun. The coffee went cold on someone's desk. The chapel stood in the early light, saying nothing, asking nothing, simply there, the way true things are simply there, patient, waiting for whoever is ready to see them. The truck drove on, and in the back of it, 2 women carried home something that no one had given them on purpose, and no one could take away. The specific, irreversible knowledge of a world that had treated them as human when it had every reason not to. That knowledge would not make the road ahead simple, but it would make it honest. And for women who had lived inside lies long enough to forget what honesty felt like, that was not a small thing. That was, in the end, everything.